welcome. I'm Karen Jenkins-Johnson, principal of Jenkins-Johnson Gallery in San Francisco and New York. Thank you for joining us. My team and I hope that you're healthy, safe, and well during these very difficult, challenging times. We welcome Art Basel Miami Beach, OVR, to our 20th Conversations on Culture, a discussion with artists, curators, and collectors on current art world topics. Today, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with three artists from our Art Basel Miami Beach online viewing room presentation: Lisa Corinne Davis, Ngobeni, and Enrico Riley. The OVR Art Basel Miami Beach is on view December 6th at www.artbasel.com. Today's topic is Rhythms of Hope and Joy. We will reflect on 2020 from the perspective of these talented artists. While I introduce the artists, we will present a slide presentation of their works in the OVR and report. Lisa Corinne Davis is an abstractionist who explores the relationship of race, culture, and history. A firm believer in the power of paint on canvas, Davis' paintings pull from the structure of digital life. They depict nets, nods, portals, puzzle-like parts, careening lines, and firewalls. The grids, networks, and circuits in her paintings suggest a depthless space like that behind a digital screen, so we cannot tell how far back they go. Davis's painting titles refer to emotional states and cognitive positions. Lisa's work is in collections of museums, including Museum of Modern Art, the J. Paul Getty, Victoria and Albert, and Philadelphia Museum of Art. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the just announced Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant. Congratulations, Lisa.
Thank you.
The National Endowment for the Arts Artist Fellow, and the New York Foundation for the Arts. Lisa is currently a professor of art and head of painting at Hunter College in New York. Second is Blessing. Blessing is joining us today from South Africa. Blessing Ngobeni is a multidisciplinary artist working in painting, collage, sculpture, video animation, sound installations, and live performances. For Art Basel OVR, we featured Blessing's large-scale mixed media paintings in which he creates a hybrid language that includes surrealism, Dada, and NeoExpressionism. His paintings are multi-layered canvases in which he combines imagery from magazines, books, and social media within his distinctive figurative characters to reflect the various perspectives of current affairs of our time. In his work, he critiques the political regime of South Africa by addressing the disconcerting consequences of betraying the democratic ideals, the failure to learn from historical tragedies, and the expanding gap between the rich and poor, the haves and the have-nots. Blessing is the recipient of the highly prestigious 2020 Standard Bank Young Artist Award for Visual Arts. Congratulations, Blessing.
Thank you.
Art Space and others consider him one of the most exciting contemporary artists of our time. His works are in public institutions, including South Africa, throughout South Africa, including the Johannesburg Art Gallery. Third and finally is Enrico Riley. Hi, Enrico.
Hey, Karen.
Enrico investigates violence and hope in historical and contemporary cultural traditions in African American culture. His new body of work expands on the rich and complex traditions of African American music, especially jazz. Enrico is interested in jazz as a symbol for creativity, inventiveness, and celebration. He thinks of his musicians in relation to the landscape as having agency to shape an environment by playing in nature in casual and formal clothing. Enrico is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Rome Prize in Visual Arts, American Academy of Arts and Letters Purchase Prize in Painting. He is in collections including the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Nasher Sculpture Center, and Hood Museum. He is the George Frederick Jewett Professor of Art at Dartmouth College. All artists are represented by Jenkins-Johnson Gallery in San Francisco and New York. There'll be a Q&A at the end of the conversation, so please send us questions via the Q&A button. Also, please join in the chat during the conversation. Hey, okay, let's get to it, guys. How you feeling, Lisa?
I'm good. I'm feeling very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, up here in upstate New York, just south of Hudson, in my studio, trying to get work done.
Great. And Blessing, what time is it? Where are you?
I'm in Western Cape in French Hook in Cape Town in South Africa. Yeah. So yeah, the weather was great today. Yeah. So yeah.
Great. What time is it there?
I think it is around 10:15. I don't have a watch. This phone does not give me, but yeah, it's around that time. Yeah.
Okay, so it's very late.
10:15. Yeah, evening.
Thank you so much for joining us so late in your evening. We appreciate it. And Enrico, hi.
Hey, Karen.
Hi. So where are you, Enrico?
I'm in Lebanon, New Hampshire. It's a couple towns south of where I live. I live in Norwich, Vermont, and I'm across the river in New Hampshire, the next state, and a couple towns down.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this is really thrilled to have you. So, you know, 2020 has been a really historical year. And how many more days do we have left? 26, 27 days?
Move it up.
I want to ask you guys, how's 2020 impacted you guys as artists and your time in your studios and your practice?
Oh, okay. Can I think for us in South Africa and for me as individual, 2020 has become a year of awareness, a year of restructuring our personal history or our collective history, where it taught us to now think as a large group of people wanting to at least achieve something or protect themselves in the near future, because when everything changed, we did not expect like anything, you know. So I think at this present moment where we're standing as a collective people, as individuals, is that we need to start to have unity amongst ourselves, to have love, to renew ourselves, and maybe face 2021 with, you know, the winning like energy, you know, where we know that we're gonna win, even if maybe the COVID will try by all means to suppress us, because remember that we were taken this opportunity away without us preparing for it. So for me, I think with that thinking is just that we need people to start thinking that we have to be ready in the near future, because we don't know what might arise, what might come on to attack us, you know. Yeah, for me, it's a sort of change, and it's sort of like awareness, sort of like we have to like start practicing hygienic amongst ourselves without waiting for something like COVID to come and tell us that wash your hands, do this, do that, you know, because we don't need this to happen again. We don't need to stay indoors, you know. We don't need to. We need our freedom. We need to move freely. We need to go as much as we could to hunt for ideas, for things to work with, you know. So for me, I think it's sort of change that it brought into my life as individual as I am right now. Yeah.
Lisa, would you like to go, or you want me to talk, or?
Go on, Enrico. I'll go last.
Okay. Okay. You know, I agree with blessings. I think for me, 2020 has been a lot about reflection. I think it's, you know, with the pandemic, the various social movements that are continuing and then have also sort of become more active, in particular Black Lives Matter. And certainly I think the build up to and the actual event, and it feels like it's still ongoing, of the election, I feel like we've been forced to be more reflective. I think we've been forced to really look at the kinds of physical and mental patterns that we're engaged in. You know, in a lot of ways, it's forced us, as Blessing said before, it's forced us all to collectively witness a lot of issues that sort of pre-pandemic, and I'd say pre-election, we probably were more able to, for good or for bad, to deal with these things on our own, in our own sort of personal ways. But you know, 2020 has had a way of making myself, but in particular, I feel like making the country witness a lot of things together, and I think that yields a kind of opportunity for change. And the question is, what are we going to do? You know, what kind of future? And it's all on the table: the climate, race, gender, you know, health and safety. All these things are on the table, and they're very clear for us to see. And the question is, what are we going to do? So that's how it sort of impacted me. I'm not sure how it has impacted my studio. I know it has. I don't know if I can put a finger specifically on any big differences, but you know, it feels like there's just sort of big things to paint about, and big things to talk about, and big things to reflect on. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about all of our locations here, you know, South Africa and Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York City. And I have to say that COVID has rerouted my brain completely as a human being. So because of the pace of where I live, my energy has always been out, like looking at shows in the classroom. I've always been aware of the output of like production of work. All of it's been this way, right? But when the lockdown happened, there was no more out anymore. It was like, I'm locked down. So I found my whole wavelength turned to in. And when I say that, I had to do things that I never gave myself permission to do before, because it's always been like out.
Yes.
Like self-reflection, you know, really focusing on community, my own identity and my pain. The pace of things got really slow and really inward. And so I think that's been a really healthy thing for me, because again, there was no permission to stop before. It was just like constant, blah, 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 blah. And so I really, you know, found it like in the middle of a semester, having to rethink education and how what I wanted to deliver to my students. And they were like, kind of like, what's going on here? And I I had to think about what mattered as far as, you know, the subject matter of my work, but also caring more about the actual thought process and the making and less about the reception of it out in the world. That's the tip for me.
Oh, focusing on your mark making and the composition element within your practice.
Yeah, make it more absorptive, less, you know, like even in the perceptive sense of it, I realized there was a change where I wanted people to go in more to the work and less me telling them things, like just blasting it out there. So there's a difference in attitude of reception of the work too, based on the way I have changed my priorities about the world because of the way the world just stopped and flipped itself for me.
Right. So, Blessing, did you find yourself spending more time in your studio?
I think for the beginning of the lockdown, especially in South Africa, was more of like you could not move away from where you are. So I had to like adopt working in my space in the house where I stay, and then of course I got limited in terms of because normally I do large scales, you know, like medium size, but I had to go smaller, which was like more of like A2 size of the dimension of the and working on Fabriano paper, and I did not do like a lot of collage, you know, because I did not have like all the material that I needed at that time, because when it hit in, I was in Mpumalanga, and then I had to drive down, you know, cancel everything, and then I went to the house. So I did not have much of my studio time as I normally have, but I did created works, which some of them I showcased them in one of the show that happened like few months ago, which was specific, speaking about that space, you know, because I started to look at the things around myself, you know, where the characters at some point switched to become like utensils, kettles, pots, plates, you know. Yeah, I mean, the work changed because I was adopting the things that I was surrounded with that moment. Also, it was also experimental to try to create a conversation or a dialogue with things that I used almost every day because I did not have anywhere to go. So that was a bit of challenge, but it worked out because it taught me to have like anything around you, to use it and then become something, to have a dialogue with things that you use every day, you know, pots, plates, forks, knives, you know, which the results of the work itself, it became very strong and powerful because when I narrated the story behind, it made a lot of sense because my kids, they were around, and then at some point they were helping me to, you know, to mix paints and yeah, you know, that switch, you know, where you like, hey, can I work with what is available? Then I had to like adapt that kind of environment at that moment. Yeah.
Okay, great. And how about your greater community, especially Enrico in Vermont, in New Hampshire? How have you this gone from your studio out? Because you had students, you've been going back and forth between your home and school, but how is this how does this you fit within your community with COVID and 2020? How has your greater community been impacted?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. I think in the spring, we were all anticipating, I think, what is happening now. And so I was still able to get to my studio. And then at some point I started shifting stuff to my house and was prepared to sort of, as Blessing said, work smaller, work on paper and things like that. Probably focus more on drawing, but the sort of situation we're in now never really materialized up here. So I was able to get to my studio pretty much the whole time. Certainly using precautions. I'm luckily in a space where I'm not with anyone. I'm in my own car, so there were some convenient things to that. Teaching was difficult. We moved to remote teaching. That impacted our academic community significantly. I think there was a sort of retooling of how you're going to deliver the education. For the administrators, there's a lot of extra logistical work to get in order. I think for the professors, there was a tremendous amount of work going into retooling syllabi and all of us trying to figure out how are we going to teach online, and so that was massively difficult and complicated, but we got through it. There's a little bit of fatigue, I think, at this point setting in. We're still teaching remote, and between, again, the logistical responsibilities and the teaching online, I think the break has come at a good time. But I think everyone, not just in academic communities, but I think everyone is getting a little fatigued and trying to hold the course until we can finally relax. You see people being overworked. You see people taking on more stuff than they normally do. You see the whole range of things. So, but again, the one thing I will say is because we're in a place where there's a smaller sort of population and there's a lot of green space. The one good thing is we've been able to get out, and this is probably similar to upstate New York. We've been able to get out and hike and bike and just sort of be outside. So that's been a real blessing, actually, to have access to the outdoors.
And is that inspiring you with your new body of work, with the music and music in the landscape, and how the music is shaping the environment? Is this coming from this new body?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always risky to make those sort of really direct relationships to things, but from environment to the work. But I've been thinking about and interested in music in my work for off and on for over 20 years, probably even longer than that. And it seems to enter the work and then exit and enter and exit. And I think certainly the imagery is coming from my environment, the things that I see, at least in terms of the landscape. And I think, really sort of being in the landscape as a sort of tool. My wife and I take our two young kids out. We have to get them out of the house, and on Saturdays and Sundays, we've been really pretty religious about getting outside. And so there's a difference. It feels different going with the kids, going as a family, and really using these excursions into the landscape as a way to get out of the house, using them as a tool, using them as a way to shift our perspective. And I think about music in that same way. In the most radical ways, I think about music as a weapon. I think about it as a tool to change one's sort of environment. it has a way and has the possibility to transport us away from difficult situations, and it has a way of building community. So with my interest, I think, in various aspects of the African American experience, I'm certainly aware of, and certainly now focusing on these sort of traditions of African American music. And I, in my own personal opinion, I think the way they have operated as tools, historically and presently, as a way to create space, create environment where there might not have been space, or there might not have been an opportunity for environment. The use and tool usage of music to create those open spaces. So yeah.
Lisa?
Yes.
We're going to go back and forth here a little bit, but one of the things that you speak about in your work, and it was actually in an article you wrote, you spoke about how many African American artists feel the obligation to represent Blackness. Mm-hmm. And your position, you talked about your position as an abstract painter. Can you go into that a little bit about that? Because you don't, in today's, we're seeing a lot of representational work or very focused on one genre, and it's great and refreshing to see an abstract painter as well as people mixing and blending.
Right. I mean, I think the Black experience has often been understood as resistance or a fight, and so and that politicized agenda has been put into painting as a kind of position, like I'm taking up a resistance here. And so that has been best carried out as in representational painting to express that narrative of resistance. And for me, I'm all for resistance and I'm all for the fight. But for me, my experience, every Black person doesn't have the same experience. And I guess I'm really trying to get to my personal experience and my personal narrative, which is different than Enrico's, and it's different than Blessing, and it's very specified to appearance and perception. And so I've been aware from a very young age of how people perceive me, or how they choose to perceive me for their own convenience. And so we often think about race in very simplified terms. And and with that, it's easier to think about it simplified terms because it gives you a position to exist in. It's like, oh, comfortable. This is my room. This is my space. I'm cool here. But I've never felt that. So the best way for me to represent that was not by figures with colors of skin, doing certain actions in certain places, or resisting certain places, or changing the narrative, which these are strategies often used. But to look at the formal devices of painting as ways of things that we trust in painting as secure, and ways of changing the position. So I want enough suggestion in the painting of places, spaces, points of view, aerial, topographical, micro, macro, so that the viewer is constantly having to adjust themselves to their own positions, and realizing that if they rethink something, they might have to change their position. And so this felt like the most comfortable place to speak about my personal experience as a light-skinned African-American woman who went to a white private school and grew up in an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. That is not like that's me. That's not you, Karen, that's me. So, and I really want the paintings to be movable, like not stay still, have a, you know, and the reference to the web, which happens, which you did in your intro, is fine. I mean, I want all possible interpretations of ways of perception and being to exist within the work.
In Blessing, you are using, you know, surrealism, Dada, Neo-Expressionism within your work. Tell us a little bit about what's happening with your practice with, as it relates to being a Black man from South Africa.
I think I'll also touch based on what Lisa mentioned about the black on black racism. Yes. You know, in Africa we have like so many, I can't even count how many of us that are speaking different languages across the African continent. Specific in South Africa, we have like 11 official languages, which my language is like the West, what should I say, the last language that is being recognized in the, you know, even when people speak, they would place you as an animal. Like they will say a Shangaan. For instance, there's this phrase where they say there was an accident where there were 2 Shanganis that was dead and 9 people. You know what I mean? So Shanganis, they are placed as the last people that exist in this community. You know what I mean? But for me, in that narration of the thinking is that we are the people that are hard workers. We are the people that are serving almost the, we write speeches for the government. We do almost every hardest job in the country. You know what I mean? So for me, when I look at it, it's in that form, then I have my own people that are not appreciating my presence. And then I have, of course, the white people on my other side that I should deal with that are more kind of welcoming you because they can hear, they can see that what you're doing is more like it has a reason, you know. So to deal with that, then as an artist, I have to create a work that is speaking at a very open way, you know. Hence, you mentioned that I crisscross like between Dadaism, Surrealism, Realism, because for me to think in that language, I wanted to find my own language that is more of me, you know, but that tells the stories of my own, and that tells also not looking outside the rest of the community. Because in my work, what I try to do is I try to find my work not being regarded as in that what you call traditional way of painting, you know, where you use similar material, you use the same form, the same, you know. So I try to disturb that thinking from the people that define art by inviting different elements in my work. For instance, there's symbolism elements that are carrying, encouraging, like they cycle around my work most of the time, which I never spoke about because I did not have people to question me about them. But I would like to bring them in at some point when we have that dialogue. But within that thinking of wanting to belong somewhere, where I try to renew the way art is being carried on, you know, because remember that bringing something new into the art world, you are kind of contribution with a new thing, so that people, they can start thinking about it rather than we stick into the traditional way of doing things, you know. And I like working with material because I think in the process of my work is more of like, I work with art magazines from across the globe, where maybe you're writing, if Lisa, you're a writer, if Riley, you're also a painter, you might find your work in my work, because in my thinking is that, how can I unite this disunited world through visual forms, you know, where I invite each and every person to come and become one piece in my work, and start speaking about how did I bring all these ideas together, to like all these people together, you know. Hence, I mean, in my work, as I mentioned, that I privately collaborate with the work of other masters, just to bring that sense of unity within the work industry, you know, the art industry, where, because I feel like there's this disunity where even we try to collaborate conceptually, then you find it hard to find a person that can understand what is it that you want to do with the rest of the people, you know. So for instance, when you're thinking about the work titled politics of being black in the world, it's when I bring in the idea of saying, where do I belong? Who do I unite with? My own people. At some point, they not wanting me to be part of them, and then also the Western people, they are not also people that can welcoming me to them. So that part of being black in a space, it become like a self-hate. It become like I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to understand the concept of being black in the world itself. Like it is you are not trusted in any way, including your own people, including your own family, you know. So in my work, I try to bring all those elements, but because remember that we're living and surrounded by, we're breathing, we're living, we're surrounded by politics. Therefore, politics has to jump into my work and become part and parcel of my process of creating these works, this visual language that I'm speaking into my work. So, yeah, I think maybe we might also discuss about symbol elements that is being carried in this work when we proceed with the dialogue.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in for a second, Blessing, because I was thinking about, in a sense, we're trying to do similar things in our work, keep this perception and ideas open about Blackness, and that there's some similar strategies, despite you being more representational and me being abstract, that we use, which is layering, you know, and this kind of hybrid making. And so like the mechanism that we both use is similar, I think, even though it, you know, it looks different in the end, in order to round out the discussion and the,
yes,
the agency around Blackness.
Yeah. I think for me, my concern and my worry is that if the system changed our mind in such a way that we cannot recognize our own, we cannot fall back in love with ourselves, where we can appreciate our own presence in a space as a Black community. Therefore, if we move as a group of people going to a white community, we won't even leave any impact there, because already we come with this disunity that we work with, you know. Even we have this concept of wanting to change the game. For instance, in South Africa or in Africa at large, there is a land issue that is happening around different people because the city life is dying slowly, you know, and most people, they don't see it, they don't recognize that. Only those that are wise enough to see that the city life is dying slowly. Therefore, there's land that is in rural areas, which requires our strength, our energy to go and rebuild it or grow food from it, you know. So in my thinking, if we could not manage to unite in this small scale, therefore, Africa is a large continent, you know, and it has been divided by the system where for you to cross to another country, you have to produce documents, you have to change currency, you have to be questioned, you know. So in my thinking, how do we, as a Black society, as a Black community, start thinking in one movement where we're like, hey, we want to build? Because, for instance, when you look at the work that it's on the screen, made in China 2, the work itself, in my thinking, it was like a work that was dedicated in trying to awaken the Africans to start working as a team, because there is a Chinese person that is walking into Africa and start, you know, tearing Africa apart through looting. You know, as you know, I work with direct titles like looters dance, you know, possessed looties, all this and that. For me, I'm trying to communicate the idea of saying, if Africans, they are not strong enough to work together as a team, there is an enemy that would come and destroy and take whatever leftovers that was left by the apartheid system or by the colonial you know, system that once happened in Africa. So in my thinking, in these large scales of thinking, I'm trying to, you know, to want Black people to love themselves first so that they can be able to defeat the enemy. Yeah,
That's
I
huge.
think
That's huge. That's huge, because we do have to love ourselves first. In anything that we do, we have to love ourselves first before we go out into the world. So then we can be who we are meant to be. So if we don't love ourselves, we're not really self-actualizing. And I think in general, I think even in South Africa and the United States, we have people that beat on us, and it wears on us. And I think that the communities need to uplift the citizens, and the artists have a place within that community. I think the community is slowly transforming, and the artists, I think it's transforming very slowly at some realm. I know that New York, in COVID, people were going out. They were going to upstate New York, and in California, they were trying to go to, you know, the wine country. They were trying to just leave the city. They were fleeing. So yes, but I think we as a people, we do have that, and it's constant. It's constant. And we have to look in the mirror sometimes every day and say, I love you. And that we're looking at ourselves saying that, feel that confidence. Because sometimes it's not coming from our family, it has to come from within us. And artists, when you go into your studios, you're oftentimes by yourself, and you have to be very comfortable and confident into what you're doing. So moving into that was pretty deep, Blessing. Thank you very much. Let's talk about the role of music, because music in general, as it relates to, not Enrico, to your current body of work, but music in general as to how it impacts your process, your practice, you're opening up your mind. What are you guys listening to, and what is the role of music in your work?
I mean, I listen to everything, and yeah, I mean, I'm listening. My two kids are both taking music lessons, so there's a lot of music in my house right now. I listen to everything from Miles Davis to Led Zeppelin to Aretha Franklin to Kate Bush. I mean, there's all kinds of music that I'm listening to. My particular interest in jazz is somewhat personal. My paternal grandfather was a jazz musician in and around New York City, and I'm sort of interested in the sort of symbolic sort of ramifications of jazz, and I think embedded in that is the idea of improvisation, and I think embedded inside of that is the concept of freedom, and whether we're talking about I think what I'm talking about is freedom with regards to the convenience to sort of move, the convenience to speak in vernacular, the convenience to work abstractly or work figuratively. I think jazz is a sort of established symbol for this idea of improvisation and freedom. So I'm sort of focusing on that sort of area for my imagery. And certainly I think by extension, again, I think there's something about symbolically, and I think we have to be careful. And I'd like to reiterate some of the points brought up earlier. I don't think it's a matter of sort of as African Americans painting abstractly or painting figuratively. I don't think it's a matter of listening to blues or jazz or listening to hip hop or listening to rock and roll or country music or whatever. I think those are sort of relatively arbitrary and not adequate ways to contain ourselves as individuals. For me, I'm interested in the symbolic ramifications of the imagery, or the symbolic ramifications of the fact that how you're working is not nameable. To work abstractly and to work in a way where things are not nameable has its pros and cons. To work in a way where things are nameable has its pros and cons. So, and they all have symbolic ramifications. So, I'm really focusing on the symbolic power sort of latent in the idea of improvisation and the freedom to move, the freedom to wear what you need to wear, the freedom to speak the way you need to speak. And, I spoke a little bit about this yesterday, but our past president, President Obama, was not afforded an opportunity to improvise and was not afforded an opportunity to move freely within the office. And our just now former President Trump was afforded was afforded and is afforded the right to improvise, to move around freely. And so
tomorrow.
So I think, I'm thinking about music. I'm thinking about music as a symbol, and I'm purposefully working in a way that's recognizable, for personal reasons, for reasons where I want the work to be readable by a wide wide body of people, and hopefully, the kind of nuance or mystery or unnameable quality, hopefully that's still present in the work if one spends time with it. And as painters, we all know that really, really fine abstract painters have figurative elements. They have figurative space. They have real space. They can have real space in their work. And really good figurative painters have unnameable qualities, have abstraction in their work. So that's sort of where I am in relation to music. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I hear artists all the time talking about music and how it's impacting them in their process and just starting their day. And some artists I hear, they start their day with one piece, and this particular piece gets them going and gets their mind focused. Blessing, you do this in the morning too.
Yeah, I wanted to add to Riley. Music plays a huge role in a process of creation of ideas in the work, because with me, I crisscross with different kind of, I love jazz, I love my traditional music. I also love, the music that they play in a drinking place, like where there's a, like right now we have this one that is much famous about Johnny Vulligate, that kind of music. So but it has its own time, during that when I'm creating work. So I feel like, what, now I need to move fast, or I need to move my brush quickly, or I need to use a certain size of a brush, because that movement of that rhythm, it creates that connection between, especially when I do the lining, when I'm doing the cycles, or when I'm using the palette knife just to apply paint on the canvas. So there's so much, because in my traditional music, the beats, it's faster than, I think it's the fastest. My traditional music has the fastest beats than other music. So each time when it plays, I bump. I'm like something with silicone. I bump all the time on top of the canvas and myself. But the beautiful part with this moment is that you won't see like your time. You will realize after that, you have done so much, and the results of the work. So it becomes like a masterpiece, because you don't count time that moment. You just being controlled, being energized by the rhythm of that music, that moment. So as much as jazz come in, the jazz make you feel move slowly, move according to that pace. But there's a moment where you want to like move fast, So I believe that Riley is right about the moment of music in the creation of the artwork. It's important. It plays a great role for different artists too, including myself.
And Lisa, your work is, you don't have any drawings, sketches ahead of time. So your work is, it's quite mark making, and it's slow. How do you keep yourself in this and focused within your studio? Are you listening to music as well, or does that have an influence?
I do not allow any music in my studio. I thought this was so interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I want to come back to something Enrico said about space,
Okay.
abstracting, and then move that into the music thing.
Okay.
Because that's what I'm interested in. If there's a thing that I work on most in my work, it's like the construction of the space, right? Because I think that the spaces we inhabit as Black people goes part and parcel to perception, right? So that is quintessentially really important to me. I am very unsophisticated about music. I don't understand jazz at all. You can take my black card away because I'm very bad at it. I live with a music writer, but I will say that I'm really interested in this notion of jazz, of improvisation that Enrico brought up. And I think about music only in conceptual ways, not auditory ways, but conceptual ways. So the way I understand jazz musicians is someone starts playing something, right? And then someone responds to that with like another set of notes, and then that becomes something. And then someone responds to that. And it's not pre-planned, it's not preordained, it happens in real time. That's exactly the construction of my paintings. Back to the drawing, Karen. There is no pre-planning, it's an improvisation. So I have to kind of own that beat in my own head in the studio. It's like I do something. It sets up a kind of vibration, and then I respond. And when things go really wrong is when I'm planning, not really in the mind of improvisation, which is truly letting go of everything and really just paying attention to that beat. And for me, that beat is in the work. It's not, if it were in the studio, I couldn't get my head into the work. So the only time I listen to music is when I'm running. And the only rule is it has to have the beat to keep me going. That's it. So, but I certainly think of the work again conceptually as musically oriented in conceptual terms. And I mean, it's funny because I was talking to my students yesterday about the studio space. Because often it's kind of underrated. Like there's this stuff that comes out of your studio, but we're like kind of have to set it up right so that the components, it'll urge us on to make the moves and the components that we need. So when Blessing says he needs that thing to the paint on, I'm like, yeah, he has to set that up because he needs that fast, you know, kind of felt mark in his work. So like how we, like the focus on like the components in the studio and how they help me make is critical. And unfortunately, I can't find a place for music in the studio because
yeah, no, that's interesting. I do love the connection with the improvisation in all the work impacting you. We have, go ahead, Blessing.
Yeah, and I want to come to Lisa's ways of thinking about the improvisation and the art things. When I started to professionally practice painting, for instance, I was surrounded by noise in the city. In Joburg, there is so much where the ambulance is like wee, 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 and the police and the people and making noise. And where I was practicing from, it was like an abandoned building where at some point it was hijacked by people who hijacked buildings in the city where there's no control. So people, they are moving up and down, all this and that in the space. I think I even did a piece, a drip teach piece titled Josie Siren, because I was reflecting towards that uncomfortability of the sound and the noise that was happening when I was training myself to become an artist, you know, which the results of that investment into the work as the work that earned me to win an award, because they questioned themselves, Josie Siren, what was this all about? Then I spoke about the a sleepless city where you could not sleep because the noise of, you know, everything is around you. You know, there's fight, there's people getting drunk, there's kids crying because the fathers and the mothers, they're somewhere drinking, you know, that kind of movement. So through that, it made me to start to think about what you're saying, that at least maybe you were introduced to the art world without that noise. Some of us, we were led by the noise to become ratchet, become who we are, you know, to just dance with an empty canvas and create something that is very noisy itself. You know, that's why maybe my work is so loud in the art landscapes, you know. Yeah, this is my latest work, Karen, by the way. The titled Ashes and Dust of Lives in Us, you know. It's the work that was supposed to be shown in your New York show. Unfortunately, it's postponed to 2022. So I thought maybe to bring it in so that we can also discuss,
Yes.
which if we have enough time, then I can break it down, you know, my elements that I wanted to speak about. There's crown, there's beds, there's chain, there's cycles, skulls, landscape, mountains, deformed figures, snakes, eyes, genitals, candles, lines, and of course there's a wolf, you know. So those are the elements that I need to define it when we go on with a dialogue on the works. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a few questions in the Q&A. Blessing, we're going to have a show for you. And COVID has postponed some things, so hang in there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I brought it up.
No. We're happy to see the painting. Thank you. It's everybody commenting on it in the chat, saying how amazing it is. So thank you so much for showing us that. I just wanted to get to a couple of questions because there's one other I want to weave in, but some people have been patiently waiting for their question. Elizabeth Rollins, she's asked one a while earlier on in the conversation. She was, Lisa, who are the influences, who guide, who continue to guide you? Not just Lisa, but everybody. Thank you each for your exceptional talents. So who are some of the influences that guide you?
Does she mean other painters?
No, I don't know. Who are the influences who continue guide you? Maybe it could be other painters. You can take it outside influences. You can take the question and run with it as you feel.
Okay. I never like to pinpoint one or two painters that influence me because it again, back to that improvisation, it changes all the time. So I have a hard time answering that question definitively. I look to many things as influences. I look to film quite a bit. The way a camera navigates a space and intentionality and emotional calibration. So I think about that. I think about architecture, back to space, how movements and psychologies are controlled by physical spaces. I've been thinking a lot lately about the natural world because I'm up here in farmland and how that has shifted another notion of urban, back to Blessing's comments, and rural spaces. So I think about structures and space as constant influences on the work more than artists, because to be honest, as a Black abstract female painter, there's not many, and a lot of abstract Black painters, male, often refer coloristically to Africa, you know, and I'm not interested in that kind of specificity. So I have a hard time finding abstract painting that, you know, is complete for me in what I'm trying to do. So Yeah, that's the best I can answer that question. And it's not music again.
That's okay. Enrico?
You know, there's a lot. I mean, I agree. There's a lot of different influences. I look at a lot of historical painters of all, you know, gender and race, varying nationalities. You know, if I had to really, if I had to really sort of break down, I think, two painters that I sort of viscerally come back to. One would be Philip Guston, and it, you know, I think many contemporary painters have either worked through some of the things that are embedded in his work, and certainly most of us know about him. But you know, as a young student, I think it was pretty shocking to see his later work, and I think as you get older, to sort of see the sort of politics that are embedded in his work, and then formally, I think for me, he was the link back to European painting. He was the contemporary painter who I digested, that then allowed me to go back and be able to be conversant with Baroque painting and Renaissance painting and medieval European painting. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's an untrained artist named Bill Traylor, who, you know, it's just, it's perfect, it's magical, you know. And then there's everything in between. There's everything in between. But I like the idea of casualness in a way in both of their work. And by casualness, I think I mean a kind of, they're like native speakers in their own language, and that's freedom to me. I mean, it's really admirable. Lisa brings up some good points. You know, I think there's a lot of ways that art making and painting, and by extension society, can sort of label and box you in, and you have to be very self-aware of what kind of information you're going to digest, and what information is good for you, and what information is ultimately going to continue to make you feel open and free. But I'm pretty I'm an omnivore. I sort of eat a lot of different things and look at a lot of different things, and it changes, you know. So,
Well, I think there's a question here in the Q&A specifically to you. They're saying it's regarding, are racial injustices in South Africa worsening? And is South Africa art community supportive of you and your work?
Yeah, I should say that there are like local people that supports my thinking, supports my journey, but at the very same time, the racial thing that is happening right now is, for me, it kind of disturbs me, because it only happens when there are serious issues. For instance, there is a Zondo commission that is happening, where there are serious matters that should be discussed. Then there's this riot that disturbed that focus, to shift the focus to a real serious thing, to focus on racial, you know, schools issues, where there are parties that are happening, only whites, and no black people that are invited, all this and that. But for me, I don't think it's a big issue that can disturb peace in the country or in the continent, because we have big issues that are money laundering, looters, you know, all, you know, like right now, what happened in with the 5 billion that was supposed to help the people. for essential services and all this and that, but nothing happened. The money just disappeared. And that moment when they were dealing with that issue, then there is this racial thing that for me it's useless, because it does not make sense at some point where in a country where ourselves we still have racial division because of the language. You speak this language, you speak that language, then there's a white person that you like, oh, because you are white, skin wise. But for me, I still feel like a skin is just a dust. You know, tomorrow if we unskin ourselves, for instance, we remove what is in front right now on us. Are we gonna run away from each other because we're ugly, or because that moment the blood will be flowing because again we remove this dust thing? So in my thinking, I feel like those are tiny issues comparing to the great issues that should be solved, you know, to make our country very better. So I think in my work there's that thing, but it's not that much, because for me it does not make sense. I don't even think about it, because if you hate me, just hate me. Carry on with your life. I'll carry on with my life. You know, I think for me racial issues like an old issue. People they have to move forward. They have to think that we don't care about it. You don't care about money. You don't care about anything. You must move. You know what I mean? So I think in my thinking, maybe that's why my work is so much, because of I don't think about race, because race does not give me anything. It's just people that are thinking that they are better than the other, but we are the same. You know, we're gonna die at the end of the day. So what else? So I don't know, but that's my opinion. That's my thinking when it comes to commenting about the race in the country. It's just a disturbing thing that we cannot focus on real issue because of other people. They just go and riot somewhere there. Nah, I don't know. Maybe that's my thinking, but I don't see it as something to disturb peace, you know?
Yeah, there's, thank you, Blessing. Thank you for that. I just have another question here I want to get to, because Marnique has been waiting as well. She says she's curious of the artist's considerations of being a general artist versus being specifically as a Black artist, and how either influences their reception, connection within art communities, featuring in galleries, etc.
You know, I was trained as an abstract painter, and you know, my work began to shift and evolve. And I think earlier, as a younger artist, I very much did not want to be labeled as a Black artist, and I think there's a whole conversation about female artists, Black artists, you know, taking on these labels and, you know, instantaneously being ghettoized, and you're sort of on the second team. You know, and the example is you never would call, you know, Willem de Kooning a white artist. You know, you just call him an artist, or that's sort of almost the sort of natural default. So, but for me, in my evolution, it became a non-issue. My thinking evolved to the point of where the painters that I really looked to and were inspired by found a way to paint from a place of strength, and found a way to paint from their entire being. And my entire being is being visibly Black. And it took some time to get comfortable with painting things that are nameable, and painting figures that have identifiable races and phenotypes. But it's a non-issue for me. You know, the work is the work, and you know, I'm an artist. I know I will be labeled as a Black artist. I know that will happen inevitably. whether I'm painting representationally or not. But there's there's something deep and powerful that I'm drawn to, and I have been increasingly drawn to, and so and that's just me. There's the bottom line is that artists are trying to be free, and so you have to respect where that artist is trying to find their freedom. And if it is in abstraction, or if it is in conceptual art, or if it is in dance, or if it is, you know, it is what it is. And time will judge whether it, you know, whether it's successful or not. And I don't think we should be concerned with that. I think we should be concerned with figuring out how we can make ourselves, you know, free, how we need to position ourselves to make the best work that we can.
You know, Enrico, it's really funny, as we were sitting here through this discussion, I'm thinking, wasn't Enrico an abstract painter? So I'm glad you revealed that. So, because I remember back in the day when you did paint abstractly. But I guess to answer that question, I started showing with June Kelly Gallery. And June, you know, is a very prominent Black dealer. And most of the artists in her gallery were Black. But June never wanted to talk about it. Like she said her role was just to reverse the population. So there were less white people in her gallery and more Black people, and she was just reversing the numbers of the other galleries. And I never really thought about it. So back to the COVID discussion. Now I want to be known as a Black artist. You know, I really want that identity, because it is freeing for me, you know, because that's what the work's about. That's where it's driven from. And so I don't want to dismiss that position, you know, back to perception and positions. I need that position to be known to people, that that's where I'm coming from, that's how I see myself, and that's where the work is driven from. And for me, in reflecting upon the lockdown, it was freeing for me, because it kept everything out of a general non-formed muck in my head. It made it very clear. It provided a kind of clarity for me in my work. And so I don't think there's anything that makes me feel like I'm on, you know, the lesser team because I identify that way. And it's truly affirming at this point for me.
Yeah, you know, I want to tell you a story about when I was in a residence in Cleveland. Came across with a person who knew my work, who saw my work, but never met me in person. Actually was a white guy, actually. So he was like, he thought I was a white guy because the form of painting and the quality of the work, the message and everything, it was kind of identifying a white person, you know what I mean? So for me, I think, let me say the work should speak for itself, you know, because I think there's so much power in work, you know, because if I have my work somewhere where people that don't know me, they think that I'm not Black, for instance, just an example, because how many people out there that are thinking that form? But in a honest way of putting things in a clear form is that white artists, they do away with anything, you know. For instance, I can give you an example with one of the guy that once photographed my work, which I was not happy with the results of the work, all this and that. But because it was a collective kind of thing, the people were like, oh, it's great, all this and that. But I said no, because being white, you do away with, even if it's rubbish, you just do away with it because you have that accent, you have that white skin, you know. Yeah, and the content that they normally present is just, it's rubbish for me, because it does not, you know, you find a white person painting black people, all this and that, and then you start speaking about poverty in Africa, all this and that. I think there's this story where I don't know which artist that went and took bones of black people, skeletons, and put it in a space and start talking about he was my friend, all this and that. But it's a skeleton of our black people, you know, putting there and then start talking about how much do you know about the black people if you're gonna, I mean, this thing, it haunts me, because even right now, there's so much books about the African culture, African history that are written by white people because they are white. Then for them, it's easy to go and sell it out, you know. So it questions that appearance of a color, like a black person and a white person, and then where we meet, we have greatest ideas, but we don't own them, you know, because people, they can do away with, you know, because they have you know that thinking. So in my mind, thinking is that, okay, I don't place myself as that white or black whatsoever, but my work has to speak my true me, my honest me, and it has to be having that quality of my ideas, you know. So I cannot place myself in either anyway on that. But I hate when people can do away with anything because of the color or because of the accent, you know, or they speak better, you know. That's my thinking.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the honesty, all of you. It's really quite thought-provoking, and I hope the audience is understanding labeling and people wanting to or not wanting to. Today, we have a lot of emerging artists, young artists out in the world. Having barriers to entry have been lowered as compared to older generation or those older than them. Or what suggestions, Enrico, Lisa, and Blessing, would you have for young artists today? And this will be the last question of the day. And I thank you all for staying a little longer. I just kept it going because I feel that there's things to be said. And then I do want to give some hope and ideas and future forward looking for young people, young artists in particular.
I think, you know, I think you don't have to be one thing. And I think this has sort of been the theme of the whole conversation. I think as African Americans, and certainly we're not a monolith, and there's a range of phenotype and skin type, and there's a range of perceptual sort of ramifications to those, you know, physical qualities. But in the end, it's a, you know, it is a label, and your job as a young artist is to not think of yourself as having to be anything. I mean, and you follow what you need to follow until you find a space that you feel like you want to really explore. I think the problem is when you begin to believe in a label, you know, that is not one placed on you by yourself, you know. So follow what you need to do. That's what I would. That's helped me, is to not believe, you know, not believe, you know, and follow your nose.
Yeah, for me, I think the young ones, they need to start, or the up and coming artists, they need to start to think as original as they are. They must not start to become something else, because once you start becoming something else, then you lose that content that you might have originally. So in my thinking, I think I work with a lot of young artists. I have a program that in search of, like, I help galleries to identify great thinkers who might take over the art landscape, or who might address us when getting older, all this and that. So for me, I think it is vital for them to not mimic others, not try to be others. They must and contribute as much as they could with original ideas, because this art landscape needs fresh minds, you know. So yeah, they must keep practicing, keep creating, keep writing ideas down. And yeah, I mean, I think observation is also important, because that's where you draw like your inspiration and ideas from, you know, by seeing what other people do out there, you know. Yeah, as much as also visiting art spaces, you know, museums, galleries, and performances of whatever, you know, that might help the young ones to think out of without a box, should I say. Yeah.
Well, being the oldest one here, I would say it's a long game. You know, that you know, there's maybe some confusion that you get your MFA and certain gallerists knock on the door and life is done. But I think it's a long conversation. We're cultural speakers. We're talking about our own selves within a cultural climate of a time. And to find the visual manifestation of that and to let it change, as Enrico said, as culture changes over time, is important to be open to. And so if you get confused and you think you're making products and you can't change your product, then that's a problem. And so the long, honest conversation with yourself and culture has to be maintained, and it can get hard to maintain that. There's a lot of outside influences of what's cool at the time, what's marketable at the time, what you're selling at the time. So I think those are the young people that I see as my students who are moving on. I mean, Enrico wasn't my student, but he was almost my student. And so, you know, I've watched him change, as he said, from an abstract painter to a figurative painter. I was a figurative painter, believe it or not, that went to an abstract painter, because how I needed to communicate with my culture and current culture, that system didn't work anymore. And so whoever was unhappy that I wasn't making those paintings anymore, you have to give it up and you have to be true to yourself. So that's the advice I would give.
That's beautiful. Thank you all. Do you guys have any last comments?
No, just thanks, Lisa, and blessings for sharing the panel, and thank you, Karen, for having it. It's great to participate.
Yeah, I would really like to thank Karen as an art dealer that believes in communication and cultural sharing, that these conversations you do are so important, and I'm really happy that you are invested in them. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome very much.
Yeah, I would like to thank Karen and Riley, Lisa. I think this was a great journey of talk. Hopefully, we're not ending here. We will have a future talks again. It was exciting, and I enjoyed the openness of it, you know, because sometimes you don't have this platform where you can just say things that you feel, you know, because I think that's the freedom that I need to talk. It's not about fighting, but it's about sharing and talking. No enemies, we talk. We have like that dialogue that can build us all together, not individuals. But thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thank you all for coming and listening. And I wish you all happy holiday, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. If I don't see you before then, others in the participants. So good evening and peace be with you.
Peace
Thank
be
you.
with you.
Guys.
Bye.